Good afternoon. I would like to welcome the Davenport community and any visitors that are joining us here today as we celebrate the life and legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. We are also live streaming this event, so welcome to all who are participating online with our celebration. My name is Jakara Edwards-House, and I am a sophomore student at Davenport, majoring in business administration. This afternoon, I'm excited for you to hear from members of the Davenport community, in addition to our keynote speaker, Dr. David Stovall. For those of you in Grand Rapids, I hope that you will brave the elements and join us on a silent march around campus at the conclusion of this event. We're going to start our program today with some opening remarks from our president. Following his remarks, Dr. Ram Booker, Executive Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, will share a melody of traditional civil rights songs with us. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Richard Pappas to the stage.
Well, good afternoon. Good afternoon. We're having people from around the university campuses join us, and welcome to Lansing, Warren, Midland, Holland, wherever else you may be, in Detroit now, a new campus in Detroit. Mine is not to really do any kind of comments except to welcome you and say to you how important it is that we understand and appreciate diversity and inclusion, because it's really, there's a bigger world issue that we're facing. And the more that we get it at the college and university level, the more that we show what inclusion means, and understanding that somebody may not intend to discriminate, but making them aware, making us aware that it's not the right thing to do. And Dr. King, who I admire a great deal, he has a lot of quotes that I love, but I said last night we have a joint venture with Grand Valley and GRCC and Davenport, and he made the comment, you know, we may have come in, all of us, from different ships, but we're in the same boat now. And I don't think it's so much more relevant right now. It's something, as we talk about immigration and immigration status, we've had a number of students here who have graduated, and they're being challenged that they may deport them. And so we've worked with our congressional delegation saying, you know, this isn't right. They're productive citizens. Let them stay. And I think it's a discussion, a debate that we can play, we can be part of. And so I'm looking forward to a presentation. I did hear him last night. It's thought-provoking. So with no further ado, welcome. I'm glad you're here. I'm glad you're at Davenport. Who's next to bring up? Let's give a round of applause for Dr. Booker.
All right, well, good afternoon, everyone. And I'm so excited to be able to contribute this part to our program. When I think about Martin Luther King celebrations, I actually can't think of, it's rare for me to experience a Martin Luther King celebration where there is not music, some form of music. Music has always played a huge role in the civil rights movement, and it served as a rallying call for those involved in the movement. So in honor of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, I will share excerpts from 4 different songs that help to motivate, to give strength and hope in the endeavor for equality and justice. And as you listen to the words of these 4 excerpts, I want you to take them to heart, meditate, think about it, but also kind of store it there in your heart and soul so that when you go out later at the end of this program and participate in the silent march, hopefully the words of these songs will you'll still be meditating on them, and you'll be envisioning brothers and sisters all across the world who have marched and shared some of these songs. Oh, Oh, freedom. Oh, freedom. Oh, freedom over me. And before I'd be a slave, I'd be buried in my grave and go home to my Lord and be free. And before I'd be a slave, I'd be buried in my grave and go home to my Lord and be free. We shall overcome. We shall overcome. We shall overcome someday. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe we shall overcome someday. Oh, deep in my heart, oh, I do believe we shall overcome someday. We shall not be moved. We shall not be moved, just like a tree planted by the water. We shall not be moved. Young and old together, we shall not be moved. Young and old together, we shall not be moved, just like a tree planted by the water. We shall not be moved. Now I'm going to need you to help me with this one. And I'm glad you clapped your hands, because that's what you're going to need to do on this one. Ain't gonna let nobody turn me around, turn me around, turn me around. Ain't gonna let nobody turn me around. I'm gonna keep on walking, keep on talking. Gonna build a brand new world. Ain't gonna let discrimination turn me around, turn me around, turn me around. Ain't gonna let discrimination turn me around. I'm gonna keep on walking, keep on talking. Gonna build a brand new world. Ain't gonna let no hatred turn me around, turn me around, turn me around. Ain't gonna let no hatred turn me around. I'm gonna keep on walking, keep on talking. Gonna build a brand new world. I'm gonna keep on walking, keep on talking. Gonna build a brand new world. We gotta keep on walking, keep on talking. We gotta build a brand new world.
Dr. Booker, thank you for sharing those beautiful lyrics with us. Can we give her another round of applause? That was amazing. I am honored to introduce our keynote speaker for the afternoon. David Stovall, PhD, is Professor of African American Studies and Criminology, Law and Justice at University of Illinois at Chicago, UIC. His scholarship investigates 3 areas. 1, critical race theory. 2, the relationship between housing and education. And 3, the intersection of race, place, and school. In the attempt to bring theory to action, He works with community organizations and schools to develop curriculum that address issues of equity and justice. Furthering his work with communities, students, and teachers, his work manifests itself in his involvement with the People's Education Movement, a collection of classroom teachers, community members, students, and university professors in Chicago, Los Angeles, and the San Francisco Bay Area, who engage in collaborative community projects centered in creating relevant curriculum. In addition to his duties and responsibilities as a professor at UIC, he also served as a volunteer social studies teacher at the Greater Lawndale Little Village School for Social Justice from 2005 to 2018. Please join me in welcoming Dr. David Stovall to the podium as he discusses Dr. Martin Luther King and the responsibilities of young people.
So I'm gonna try this. Okay, it's working. So, peace and greetings, everybody. Before I begin, let me first acknowledge the indigenous people whose land our feet rest upon, whose names we do not know, but never mention, but always should be in part of our work, right? Because I think that's important, and it's a lesson that Dr. King was putting forward to us a lot of times that we would not recognize. Now, I've been at the University of Illinois, Chicago for 19 years. I've been working with young folks and families for 25 years. My high school seniors at this moment, so in addition to being a professor, I teach a high school social studies class with one of my former undergraduate students. My high school seniors were born between 2001 and 2002. Right? Just real talk, right? And I graduated, so literally, I graduated when they weren't even thoughts to their parents, right? I graduated high school almost 30 years ago. So now, in looking at them, I have to be clear that there are a couple of things that I cannot do. And it goes back to something that Dr. King actually got from working with young people. One of the things that I cannot do in talking with my high schoolers and my college students is start sentences with "back in my day." Right? I cannot do that. Because as soon as I do that, I begin to alienate you. And that particular alienation is now starting to is actually a mental trick to try to make you feel bad about yourself. But adults, we forget this. It really just makes you ignore me, right? Another thing that I cannot do is start sentences with things like, "What's wrong with y'all?" Right? Because that's another one that folks are quick to do. Again, because they're not paying attention. So now, as somebody who graduated high school 30 years ago, the first thing I have to say is, things are different. And in recognition of how those things are different, the work becomes, how do we make it so that we can work together with each other? I never see myself in opposition to young folks. I never see myself as somebody who is demeaning them. I always see somebody that I'm actually working in solidarity with, because we together will determine the justice condition. And when young people are able to participate in determining a justice condition, I would argue that we are all the better. The issue and concern becomes, what are the ways that we begin to listen to young people? And if we listen to young people, how do our actions change? And there's a very serious lesson that I actually get from Dr. King. And let me say this. In too many instances, we try to sanitize King. And when we sanitize him, we reduce him to one moment in time. Everybody had this grade school experience where somebody had to recite, "I had a dream," or you had to write it down, or you had to look at the speech and read it for 1 point in a day. It is a tragic disservice. So now, what does it mean when we complicate King's life a little bit? Because we never talk about King between the years of 1964 until his assassination in 1968. And the reason why we don't talk about those particular years is because King put out a very specific challenge to the world. And that challenge was, we need to rethink what we're doing. Now, who brought King to that space? Young folks. And those young people have never been given credit for it. In fact, there are two groups of people in any type of revolutionary movement that never get credit: young people and women. And these particular young folks were challenging King to think about this differently. Because King had a particular tactic that he would use. His tactic was to get visibility on what he was doing, to actually put out in the public what was happening to people throughout the country. Young folks said, well, now that's one part of the tactic. The second part of this work is you now have to make a claim to what you're fighting against. And King, in this very explicit way, started to shift. And one of the things that he shifted on first was his opposition to the Vietnam War. And we rarely talk about this in high schools or grade schools because now that's seen as quote unquote anti-country or anti-USA. But what we really have to understand is when we talk about these things like war, we have to talk about what it really means. And King started to study this. And he looked at what was happening to the Vietnamese. And then he said something like, the logical end to this war is a justification of genocide. The elimination of a people. Not because of any type of geopolitical difference, but just because people wanted access to a particular set of resources. And I would argue that we see this to this day. And herein lies a problem. We think about Dr. King's work as just existing some 50 plus years ago. But the relevance of the work is right now. And we don't make that connection. And a lot of times we don't make that connection because people are fearful when you make that connection. I have to talk to us just like I have to talk to you all like I talk to my students very honestly. I am very clear what the United States is founded upon. And they are not those scribbled on rights that people talk about in the Constitution. We live in a place that was founded on genocide, slavery, and wrongful land appropriation. When we don't say that, we're doing ourselves a disservice. King was clear about that. Young people challenged him to get even clearer about it. So now, what are we willing to do knowing those truths? Why does it work to some people's advantage to hide those truths from them? And why do we perpetually hide those truths? What is it that has us fear telling the truth? What has us fearing what can be done to us? What has us fearing that if this happens, it's going to hurt somebody's feelings? And young folks were saying, we got to worry about folks' feelings after all this happened to people. I don't know what we're going to do. And here's the thing. When we say things like white supremacy, racism, wrongful land appropriation, those are not name calling. That's telling a particular truth. Now, the issue is, if we know these things to exist, what is our responsibility to change the condition? And now, everything that you do must be connected to how you work to change the condition. I'll give you all an example. The thing that I worry about the most in schools is how we lie to young folks. And this is what I'm concerned about. A lot of times as you get older, you hear things that are actually historically accurate and you refute them. You say stuff like, that didn't happen. Stovall, what are you talking about? And the thing is, not only did it happen, but it's been kept from you. And it's been kept from you because certain people want to stay in power. Because when you uncover these things, you're going to make a conscious decision and say, hold on, wait. This doesn't work, right? So what if you told kindergartners the real Columbus story? Right? Now, I know education folks get into this all the time. Stovall, that's not age appropriate. If a young person is old enough to survive racism, white supremacy, degradation, isolation, and marginalization, they are old enough to be engaged with historical accuracy. And if you are willing to do that, now your reading lessons become, what does it mean to read Columbus's ship log? What did he say? And more importantly, what did he do? Right? Went the wrong way, called folks the wrong name, brought all his homies to bring death and destruction. Right? Stovall, you just hate us, don't you? Right? But what is it that actually gets us into that space? Right? And now young people challenge King to do the same thing. So once those young folks challenged King to engage that, King's changed up his language. He started to talk about poor people. See, there's a political ploy that happens in the United States. You always hear this middle class aspiration, right? You always hear this term, people who are the middle class and aspiring to the middle class. And then when you ask somebody what it really means, nobody knows what the hell it is. Right? In fact, if you listen to Malcolm Ford, the middle class was people who make anywhere up to 250 grand a year. No, Forbes. But the whole thing is now saying, no, we got poor folks. But in fact, not only do we have poor folks, we have people who have been excluded. And now we have to talk about how have those folks been excluded. So when I come here to Grand Rapids, I'm always amazed at the infrastructure of you all's downtown. Right? I'm always like, what? There's a whole bunch of stuff here. And the next question I ask is, who used to live here? Who got moved out? What was the rationale of them getting moved out? Right? And what has replaced them? I have to ask another question. What do the schools look like? Who goes where? What's the rationale for them going there? And now when you look at disparity in terms of who has what, why do the folks look different in those schools? These are very basic questions where real answers come out in very different ways that make us uncomfortable. And this thing around now, everybody thinks that racism is heightened. Guess what, y'all? If you got a place that was founded on white supremacy, wrongful land appropriation, and genocide, you are always going to have a race problem. You've never engaged it. So now when you say it, someone, why are you so racist? And I'm saying, wait, y'all, look. If we can't have this conversation, then where are we actually looking? And King challenged us on this. He literally said, if I cannot talk to people about what is happening to them in their day-to-day lives, of what purpose is a movement? Why are you doing what you do? So now when you start to think about this again, you have to see it differently. And when you see it differently, you don't have as many friends. All right? Now, I know social media has kind of disconnected people from interaction. So I was happy to see people actually talking to each other when I went down to get something to get a tea in a little cafeteria space. I was like, man, because they always say that about you all as young people. You don't talk to each other. I was like, no, they actually are talking to each other. But I actually wanted to walk up to the conversation and be like, man, I'm glad to see y'all talking to each other. Then it's like, who is this weird dude, right? But this thing about now, how do we start to interact in a particular way that's going to make us uncomfortable? And this is the thing. If you have never discussed something, there is no expectation for you to be comfortable with it because you don't know it. So now when we start to engage it, who is included? Or as my students say, how do we begin to see people? Another question is, who has never been seen? So now, over the past 4 years, I've had 5 transgender students who have all made transitions. And in my classes, I would get hot, and I'm like, how are the ways to hold people accountable? And they always say, no, Stovall, what does it mean to hold someone? Then I got hella frustrated. What do you mean? And then they were like, no, hold someone. Hold someone, look them in the face, and say, whatever this thing is, we're in it together, but we must commit to be together. That's a hell of a piece. Think about doing that to somebody you don't like. All right? Most of the time, we won't. And King was revolutionary in that practice. He dared to say, look, this is not about liking folks. This is about making sure that this place exists. King had a warning against what he referred to as the destruction of the planet. And he was talking about environmentalism. He was talking about the way in which we pollute this place that we live. He was also talking about our attention to poverty and the combination of poverty and race globally. For the last day and a half, I've been saying this. Some people here have heard me say this. They just released a report from Davos, Switzerland. 26 dudes have as much money as half the planet. Now, let me say this again. 26 dudes, cisgender dudes, have as much wealth as half of the planet. So now we talk about equity. Who is going to get some of that? How is that redistributed? 26 people have trillions of dollars between them 26, but it gets better. Last year, it was just 8 of them. 6 of them were from the United States. So we have a wealth issue here, people. We have a wealth issue that is promulgated around issues of race, class, gender, age, and ability. So when we can have that conversation, we're all the better. But young people press King to say, you have to engage in these difficulties. These are not easy times coming. But for many folks, it has never been easy. So now we're just seeing what this place has always been. So it's not a new racism. Some people have just been put up that it really exists. You have celluloid imagery that shows you that it exists. People have been living it since there has been this place. And now when we wish to see it, there's a responsibility of making a connection. And young folks pressed King to make that connection. And he made that connection. And when he made that connection, the federal government, particularly J. Edgar Hoover under the FBI, said he was more dangerous. We need to be clear about that. So now, when we start to talk about those dangers, when we start to talk about those fears, there is no running from them. There's only us being committed to go into them. I was mentored by a guy named Bill Ayers, who always says, Stovall, you must be clear about your willingness to enter your contradictions, because in that contradiction, you will always see yourself. So I don't say this as something that I am unwilling to do. I say this to you all as somebody who is struggling to do it. And some days are better than others. Real talk. Right? I've had visions of getting a $6,000 retainer from some high-end lawyer, because when I pop off, I might be able to get out of jail before they sentence me. I literally think about that. I was like, man, let me just save up this dough real quick. I'm gonna need that retainer. because when I put my through his, I might catch a case, right? So now I have to think about that in real time, right? Because I don't want to say, because a lot of times when we are engaging with each other, a lot of times we're not honest about what those things are. And I want to be painfully honest with you all, because if I'm not, then I'm just putting on a front. And struggle is not just real, struggle is in perpetuity. And King talked about, after he engaged with young people, freedom is a commitment to end suffering. So now, you got to ask a question. Who amongst us is suffering? And not how do you do that as some form of charity to assist them, but how do you do it in solidarity to end suffering? Because you're actually talking about the end of your own suffering. If we ignore racism, classism, ageism, transphobia, homophobia, we are engaging in our own suffering. We have to be able to see folks. Young people challenged King to see folks very differently. And his language changed in those last 4 years of life. And in those last 4 years of life, he was willing to push himself in a very different way and say some very unpopular things. In fact, from 1964 to 1968, King's popularity plummeted. And he was willing to do this. So now, in an age where babies are dying at borders and lives are being justified as being contained and incarcerated, very different thing to think about. We must have the language to discuss disparity. We must have the language to discuss white supremacy. We must have the language to discuss homo and transphobia. If we do not, we are doing more of the same. And I am tragically worried about what more of the same means for those who are suffering. So when we think about King's work and the challenge that young people laid to King, they also challenged him, and he responded with a challenge to young people to do their work from a space of love. Now, I've given you all this, me and my intentions, so it's hard as hell sometimes to talk about that you love somebody, right? Because you think about that fight. Sometimes I think about, this fight, I was like, man, UFC ain't got nothing on fighting in a phone booth. Like, what does it mean to fight somebody in a phone booth? Right? That is a fight. Like, that is a fight to the end. Think about that. Right? I know we don't have, in the age of cell phones, we don't have as many public phones. But if you go to England, they still got them. I'm like, man, what would it mean to fight somebody in a phone booth? What's about this big? Right? Somebody is winning and somebody is losing. There is no draw in the phone booth. Right? So this thing around now, when we start to think about that, what does our work mean to shift that and operate from a space of love? You do what you do because you love who you are committed to. You do what you do because you love the fact that if you do it from a space of love, more people will see it. That was the challenge that King replied to young people with. He said, I agree with you. We have to claim our humanity. But in the claim of our humanity, if we forget love, we continue to do more of the same. It is the hardest work. I will not lie to you. So now, if we're willing to engage that which is hard, that which challenges us in a very different way, that's going to have us ask questions of ourselves. Now, when we look to King, we can no longer sanitize him. We can no longer reduce him to August 28, 1963. We must look at everything that he challenged us to do. I worry that when we reduce it, we lose the point. King's challenge was, do not lose the point. The justice condition is one that we must commit to. The justice condition is not enacted by one person alone. And there were women that challenged King around that. So now we start to think about King. We should also think about all the people who were connected to King, like Bayard Rustin, who we never talked about, like Ella Baker, who we never talked about, like Fannie Lou Hamer, that we never talk about. All right? Like Shirley Chisholm, who now spirit is being recalled to a woman by the name of Kamala Harris. We now have to think about how we revisit and reimagine history, all right? And not the lies. So if we have interrupted the lies, we have committed to freedom. And freedom is always the end of the suffering. And that conversation between King and young folks is what got him to talk about that. And that's what made him the most dangerous. And I would challenge us to stay the most dangerous. Because peace is a process. And it's a process that begins often with very difficult conversations and very difficult work. And that's a challenge that I don't just put on to you all, but something I am trying to live my daily understandings. So as we move to our work, let us not forget what King challenged us to do. And when he challenged us to do that, I hope that that challenge does not go in vain. Thank you all. So they're giving me an opportunity to do a bit of Q&A. Sorry for the awkward moment. But one of the things that, again, as somebody who's struggling with this, no question is an inordinate question. I understand that we all come to this from very different spaces, but please feel free to ask those questions and we'll go from there. Yes, ma'am. Yeah. So is it all right if I repeat your question to everybody, so if they may not have heard it? So the question was, what do I mean by fighting in the telephone booth? Oftentimes, when you are passionate about particular things, you feel a particular way. And in feeling that passion about something, you will be willing to engage folks in a space that probably will operate towards your detriment than probably towards some type of justice condition. So that fight in the phone booth is you saying you're willing to die, right? But a position of love says, what does it mean that you're willing to live, right? Because we think the justice condition is somebody saying, man, I'll die for this, what's good? But another thing is about saying, I'll live for this. What are we willing to do? Right, in terms of thinking about that. And I still think about those struggles, right? In fact, for faculty here, that's how sometimes I envision faculty meetings. Fighting the phone booth. It's like, I might not make it. But man, somebody gonna get it, right? But I know I have to do better around that. Yep. Mm-hmm. The question was, I don't hold back. So how many students end up dropping my class? You know, it's been interesting. I think the approach has actually had the adverse effect, right? I come in with the hope that happens. It doesn't. So it's a really strange thing. But I think one of the things that happens is no matter what viewpoints folk come from, I think what people appreciate is just people engaging them at a real level and saying like, and really kind of asking that question, what are we really talking about here? Or what are we really dealing with here? Because a lot of times in classes, as faculty, we can just give you this stuff as rote fact. And that's not necessary. And for me, I always think about when people give that to you as rote fact, you'll start to tune out. So I think one of the ways of saying, well, what does it mean to actually engage this? Or have we ever engaged it? And I think that's one of the ways where people start to think about, oh, okay, well, here's a different perspective. I may not agree, but here's a different perspective. So I think that's what keeps folks in and opposed to dropping. Now, I say that to you as somebody who teaches a class in Chicago, right? So that might be a little bit different in terms of how folks approach it. But in a different place, it could very well be different, right? I think that's important. I think that's why your question to me is so important. Because in a different place, that could be, I could say this stuff I'm saying and then have, start a class of 35, have 2 the next day with death threats, right? So this thing around really being honest about that. But I think one of the things, and in talking to my students afterward, what they appreciate is not just kind of coming at these things as immutable facts, but saying, does this beg a different question? And if it does, to what extent are we willing to engage it? Mm-hmm.
You made the statement that peace is a process that begins with very difficult conversations. And my concern is, I think right now what's being modeled throughout the country, if not the world, is that we cannot have difficult conversations. Are you aware of any examples, any communities where they are successfully having difficult conversations? We don't see it on the TV. I don't see it in social media.
Right. And I'll just repeat that for folks who may not have heard. We talk about a peace process, and the peace process beginning with difficult conversations. And are there places in the country where people have engaged these difficult conversations? One of the spaces where we see these difficult conversations are peace circles in many indigenous communities. And what they start with, and these situations are sometimes harrowing, right, in terms of the interaction between folks, right? And this is everything from abuse, this is everything from what people would call physical crimes or what have you. And now people are saying things like, and it's a heavy thing to grapple with, and I've talked to folks who do peace circles, because a lot of times when people talk about restorative justice, people think about it programmatically. And a lot of folks, especially a lot of indigenous elders, they talk about restorative justice can't be a program, right? It's a process, right? It is a way of doing and knowing, right? So when you start to think about that in particular ways, one of the things that comes out, and I got a chance to hear people talk about this, and it's a hard concept to grapple with, and I still have some difficulty with it. The worst of us is still us. What are we willing to do to heal? Because that's a heavy statement, right? Because that's a statement that's saying, yes, something has transpired that has deeply harmed someone. The initial feeling is for retribution, punitive retribution, right? And now, what does it mean for that person who has exhibited that harm to still be considered us? Right? And that's the most difficult, but they're actually members of the Navajo Nation, the Cherokee Nation, the Ohlone in California. They have engaged these spaces where they're asking these very difficult questions around real issues. And I think that's an example. You also have some schools that are now starting to do what they call intercommunal dialogues. And it actually came from the University of Michigan. And it's called intergroup dialogue. And the thing that the founder of intergroup dialogue said, and I like what she said, I'm sickened by what it has become. Because what she originally intended it to be was for folks to have very difficult conversations. But of course, when things become sanitized and monetized, the argument is now for people to make it safe and palpable. She always said that was never the intent, right? In terms of the intergroup dialogue. So now, can we begin to think about intergroup dialogue that pushes us, in opposed to thinking about it as just something that you're requiring freshmen to do? I think those things come in. Yep. Mm-hmm. Yes, ma'am. Yeah, and it's thank you for that, and I'll just repeat it for folks who may not have heard it. So the question was around, where I situate this in my classes, but how do we situate this for folks who may not have had these kind of entry points to now think about our world differently? So are there some pointers around how to engage those folks? And I think this approach will sound super mundane, but it's really interesting to me when you ask folks this particular question. What do you know about yourself? Right? I mean, it's just that, because a lot of times when people spew this kind of hatred and ignorance, they haven't gone deep into even who they are. Right? So now you say, what do you know about yourself? Right? And then they get to expect a strange look. What do you mean? I mean exactly what I said. What do you know about yourself? And now from what you know about yourself, how is that placed onto other people? Are you assuming something that you may not know? What do you know? Right? And some folks might think about that as a confrontational question. Right? It's like, no, I'm asking that because those particular hostilities are the crux of the issue. What do we know about each other? What are we willing to know? What are we willing to say that we're actually wrong about? Right? Because that thing around really, because it's a different set of realities when you engage that. Right? Because now it's not this whole thing around, well, all right. No. What do you know about you? Right? And it's not even a diffusion tactic. Right? Because a lot of times people, in colleges and universities, we always get the language of de-escalation. Right? But it's really around saying, let's turn that question inward. Right? What do we know? Right? What is that? So, even in a place like I'm from, we still got the fake news folks, right, who get into that. I was like, all right, well, let's start here. What about it is fake? Or is it really around you don't like what they said? Right? And that thing around not being fearful around that, right? Around, they're coming to take our jobs. Who? Because that's like, who are these people, right? And then when we look at it a little bit deeper, we start to see that folks have actually been recruited. Different question, right? And then he says, well, Stovall, you're anti-American. Okay. I operate from understanding that the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution have a convenience clause in them. Never talk about the convenience clause in the Declaration of Independence. Declaration of Independence says if people experience tyranny they consider to be tragic, they have a responsibility to do something. What if you were taught that in civics class? That's in the first paragraph. Damn. Right? Like, man, that's the first paragraph. Like, we ain't even talking about reading to the 30th page. That's the first paragraph. Right? What in the Constitution says in the 13th Amendment that unless you are in a space for punishment for a crime, slavery still exists. That's not Stovall's conjecture. That's the document. So when we start to look at 7 million people under either incarcerated or under some form of state supervision, different question to ask, right? And just keeping it there, right? So does our engagement allow us to engage what's happening, or are we still resting in an opinion that we haven't asked a question in terms of what informs that opinion? All right, so this thing around how we even start to think about this, right? And keeping it, because a lot of times things can just kind of flow into this kind of conjecture. Keep it factual, right? Because that's the whole thing. Because people will go right to their experiences. Well, what happened to me? Mm-hmm. All right, 350 million people in the United States. 1 to 350 million. Say your experience is generalizable. To the stats folks. Right? So this thing around really thinking about this, so keep it factual, right? Don't slip, don't go down that slope around now the comparisons of opinions. Mm-hmm. Right, and I'll just repeat that, folks who may not have heard. Yeah, so what is the source of truth for actually defining the leverage between righting these wrongs? And it's an interesting piece because it's connected to how King interpreted the Bible. So he would talk about these things are, the justice condition is determined by the people who have experienced the injustice. Right? And I think that becomes critically important. So now, who are the people who have experienced the suffering, right? Materially, right? So how do we now start to think about that, right? So when he talks about a war on poverty, so King, in Where Do We Go From Here, Chaos of Community, he talked about a living wage, right? He talked about a wage, the employment that was sustainable for people, right? So this thing around, so now there's an organization called Fight for 15. The argument with Fight for 15 is that $15 an hour is just the baseline, right? We should live in a world where that should be the start, right? And you only go up, right? So, and economists get into this thing, well, if you do that, then all this happens, but you actually have examples of places that do this, right? But this whole notion around what accounts for infringement or what have you. I always like to use this example of Denmark. Some people have probably seen this data. Denmark is rated as the happiest country in the world. And the thing I say to myself is, shit, they would be happy. What do folks have in Denmark?
Legos.
Right? Hella Legos. Right? Free healthcare, free education, K through 20. Right? So if you want to get a PhD in Denmark, it's free. Free. If 2 people get in a house that's abandoned in Denmark and you stay in it for 6 months, it's yours. Let me say that again. 2 people live in a house that's been abandoned for 6 months. According to the Danish government, that house is now yours. I would be happy as hell too. Right? But this type of thing, right? But in terms of the justice condition is always the one that we argue around, right? The justice condition, but now we have to ask a question around who has experienced the injustice, right? If you have not been allowed access to quality education because your school doesn't have a library, then what do? Build a library and then some. Right? So it's really around asking these questions around equity. So it's not everybody getting the same thing because everybody doesn't need the same thing. Equity means people should get what they need because they need it. Right? And that can play out thousands and millions of different ways. But now that justice condition is determined by those folks who have experienced that injustice, right? In terms of the level, because that's often the thing around competing spaces. When we ask something like, well, who's experienced the suffering here? Right? And now, how do we now start to think about that suffering in a very different way? Because the conversation between Denmark and the United States is really not around one's being taxed, but it's, happiness, but it's really around people being taxed, right? In particular ways, and how those taxes are used, right? But again, not running from those conversations, but really entering into where those fractures occur. Thank you for that. It's important. It's an important piece. Yep. Thank you all again.
Thank you, Dr. Stovall. We appreciate the important work you are doing and commend you for your dedication to addressing issues of equity and justice. I hope that each of us can reflect upon the responsibility that we have to take an active role in bettering our communities. I am part of a student organization for women of color called Aspire, which stands for Achieving Success Through Positive Interaction, Reflection, and Empowerment. Several members of the group are here today to share Dr. King's I Have a Dream speech in various languages, poetry, and a duet, instrumental. You will find their names listed on the screen. I hope you enjoy their performances.
我有一个梦想，然而100年后，黑人依然没有获得自由。100年后，黑人依然被站的攀上有种族隔离和种族歧视的枷锁之下。100年后，黑人依然生活在物质繁荣、暗黑的贫困孤岛上。美国没有从对纸币先生的教育，而是开始给黑人一张空头支票，一张给资金不足的英国被退回的支票。但是我们绝不相信正义的银行会补偿。
À présent, il est venu le moment de faire les vieilles promesses de la démocratie. Il est temps de surmonter le moment obscur, désolant de la ségrégation pour rejoindre le chemin éclaircissant de la justice raciale et renforcer la recherche de la fraternité. Pour gagner notre place, justement, nous ne devons pas nous rendre coupables d'actes illicites.
Hay quienes preguntan a los devotos de los derechos civiles, ¿cuándo estarás satisfecho? No estamos satisfechos y no estaremos satisfechos hasta que la justicia caiga como las aguas y la justicia como una poderosa corriente. Este será el día en que todos los hijos de Dios podrán cantar con un nuevo significado. Mi país es tuya, dulce tierra de libertad, de ti yo canto. Tierra donde murieron mis padres, tierra del orgullo del peregrino. Desde cada lado de la montaña que suena la libertad. Y si Estados Unidos quiere ser una gran nación, esto debe hacerse realidad.
When we allow freedom to ring, when we let it ring from every city and every hamlet, from every state and every city, we will be able to speed up that day when all of God's children, black men and white men, Jews and Gentiles, Protestants and Catholics, will be able to join hands and sing in the words of the old Negro spiritual, free at last, great God Almighty, we are free at last.
Wow, what versatile ladies. Nicole spoke Mandarin, Josephine spoke French, Maia spoke Spanish, and Tyler spoke English. Can we give them another round of applause? It's pretty hard to do. And now we'll have an instrumental solo by Ali Dantzler. This Aspire group is just something else. But now we'll have poetry by Janaea Riley.
From the color of my skin, to the texture of my hair, to the length of my strands, to the breadth of my smile, to the stride of my gait, to the span of my arms, to the depth of my bosom, to the curve of my hips, to the glow of my skin, my black is beautiful. It cannot be denied, it will not be contained, and only I will define it. When I look in the mirror, my soul cries out, my black is beautiful. And so today, I speak it out loud, unabashedly, I declare it anew, my black is beautiful. Whether celebrated, imitated, exploited, or denigrated, whether natural from inside or skillfully applied, my black is beautiful. To my daughters, my sisters, my nieces, my cousins, my colleagues, and my friends, I speak for us all when I say again, my black is beautiful.
Thank you again to all our participants. Please join me in giving them one more round of applause for Aspire. This is the 7th year we have sponsored the MLK Day Essay Contest at Davenport. Today we'll be recognizing the top essays based upon this year's theme, which focused on youth and social activism. The theme was inspired from Dr. King's address at the Youth March for Integrated Schools on April 18, 1959. Dr. King suggests that young people have a responsibility to fight against inequalities. Regardless of our career path, each of us must be a dedicated fighter for civil rights. This address was given nearly 60 years ago. However, Dr. King's challenge is still very relevant today. Additional information about the theme can be found on the screens. Numerous essays were submitted from across the university and our global campus. Thank you to all students that took the time to reflect on this important topic. In addition, I would like to thank the Davenport staff and faculty members that served as judges. I will now introduce the authors of our top 3 finalists, who are here to share their essays with us today. Our 3rd place winner will receive a $100 gift card to the bookstore. Our recipient is Nahad Jabo, a student completing a degree in network management and security. Let's give him a hand as he takes the stage.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here and giving me the honor to speak in front of you. From our very first steps into an educational environment, whether that be daycare, preschool, or kindergarten, we have all been told that we will grow up to be successful people at least once. Teachers fancy for their students to be people who accomplish great things and become functioning members of society later down the line. This is the ideal outcome, but unfortunately there are a lot of roadblocks students have to get through in order to even come close. Social injustice is one of these roadblocks, and it takes many different forms that all prevent students and people in general from achieving a comfortable place in society. Discrimination of religion, sexual orientation, and race are just a few forms it takes. They make it tough for someone to be comfortable in their own skin, let alone engage in society. Social injustice is not anything new. It has been around for a long time, and more fighters are needed to combat it. It is important for the younger generations to begin standing up for social justice because every person counts in this battle. These up-and-coming generations have grown up surrounded by technology and one very powerful tool in particular, social media. With this tool, a single person has the ability to broadcast a message to a wealth of people simultaneously. Young people have more power today to make a statement against social injustice than ever before by using these tools. Though marches and demonstrations are still plausible ideas, other actions are also possible. When you see it, speak up. Do not let social injustice happen around you. Let people know how you feel and harmonize with others who feel the same way to help transmit your message to larger crowds. Do not stop there, though. Bring it to the attention of people in power by writing letters to them. Every person counts. A social issue that caught my eye involves the religious spectrum of social injustice, and it is Muslim immigration into the United States. Ever since the events of September 11th of 2001, there's been a dark cloud over Muslim Americans. An entire religion is being judged over the acts of a couple of extremists. Recent events regarding the travel ban also shine a hateful light on the religion. My goal of increasing awareness over the matter would start with educating people of what the religion of Islam is about, and that it does not condone actions like the ones you see on TV. There's too much inaccurate information out there to let it slide. Education is the #1 way to clear the air surrounding the religion and inspire change. Change can only be made by standing up for social justice. In the Bill of Rights, we are given this freedom to speak our minds without fear of detainment. So use it and better your soul by helping each other in our nation like our founding fathers intended for us. Thank you.
Congratulations, Nahad. I would now like to introduce our second place winner who will win a $200 bookstore gift card. Our second place winner is Brooke Shirley, a human resource management student. She has joined us this afternoon to share her essay.
Social justice refers to the equal distribution of wealth, opportunities, and privileges within a society. Social injustice occurs in a situation where the equals are treated unequally and the unequal is treated equally. Social injustice can come in many forms, including racial discrimination and homophobia. The action of demonstrating a social injustice is horrific and must be brought attention to. Due to racial discrimination, many young people have died. For the first time in the history of the United States, older people are projected to outnumber children. The younger generation is the future of the United States and can make the biggest impact. It is important for the younger generation to advocate for social justice because this is something that has an effect on everyone. From a young age, children are taught to treat everyone equally, but as they age, they can learn to hate a race or hate the way a person is. This then causes them to grow up with hate rooted in their hearts. The younger generation is the generation that everyone is looking at because they are the future of the world. They can bring awareness to the social injustices that occur and teach people to treat others equally. This can happen by talking to their peers about the issues that are occurring, contacting local officials, and bringing these issues to the media. The younger generation is rooted in technology, and the best way to reach out to others and spread awareness is with social media. The social issue that I'm passionate about is the discrimination of African Americans in the criminal justice system. They are often wrongfully convicted of crimes based on their race. Black people convicted of murder or sexual assault are significantly more likely than their white counterparts to be later found innocent of the crimes. The criminal stereotype of African Americans in the United States is an ethnic stereotype according to which African American males in particular are stereotyped to be dangerous criminals. Young people can stand against social injustice by holding rallies to raise awareness of the discrimination of African Americans in the criminal justice system. By holding the rallies, this brings awareness to people of all ages that the criminal justice system needs to change and treat everyone with fairness and equality. When you stand up for social justice, it makes a greater person of you by opening up your mind to the world around you. The 14th Amendment means states must treat citizens equally and can't favor men over women, whites over blacks, or heterosexuals over gays. There have been countless historical figures that have fought for the fairness of all American people. Why has the United States gone back to a time where social injustice was normal? The younger generation has the chance to change the world for the better, and I hope that what I do inspires that change. Thank you.
Thank you, Brooke. It is now my pleasure to announce our 2019 MLK Day Essay Contest winner, who will be awarded a $1,000 scholarship. This year's winner is Ismail Aguirre, majoring in Human Resource Management. Ismail will also share its essay with you today. Give him a round of applause.
Before I begin, I'd like to say thank you for giving me the honor of being able to present this to you. Every morning, hundreds of young people wake up to get ready to go to school, or to work, or to visit friends and family. Most individuals may be aware of the similarities in their goals and dreams, the desire to have a better future for themselves. However, they may not realize that it's not always the talent and brilliance of each person that gets them ahead in life, but rather the description of that person's outside. Be it skin color, language, disability, or gender, the numerous social barriers that stop individuals from fully realizing themselves must be dealt with, starting with understanding oneself. Standing up for social justice provides equality and justice for all those who face these barriers. Each morning that a person wakes up, they have the responsibility to fight for a better nation, for themselves and for their children. Standing against social injustice begins with having people know that their community is willing to help. Participating in food drives or providing useful items like school supplies to the poorer families in low-income areas allow these families to satisfy immediate needs and continue working to improve themselves. Additionally, a person can get a better sense of what the most prominent issues are in these areas by asking the affected groups. Another possible action is to gather information about the local workforce in the community. Bringing any disparities in the hiring of certain groups of people over others to the local government can help bring awareness of these practices to the community. Perhaps one of the most prominent social issues today is the threat of deportation towards illegal immigrants who were brought here as children. I've come to know individuals in this status, and coming from immigrant parents myself, it pains me to see their struggles. Although some qualify as dreamers and are protected to some extent under federal law, many still face the inability to apply for work legally without the proper documentation, affecting also their college education and driver's status. But one strategy to help these immigrants is providing transportation to and from wherever they need to go, such as a doctor's appointment or an immigration court date. Another important strategy is to help keep individuals inspired to work towards their dreams by valuing them as people and not as status, and to offer them jobs in the areas where their legal status won't affect them. When one stands for social justice, it shows that you have an interest in helping others in spite of the negative stereotypes and difficulties of offering one's service. It makes a greater person of yourself by wanting to see the community grow positively by helping all of its denizens have equal opportunities in life. It makes a greater nation of our country by inspiring other individuals and communities to do similar acts of kindness towards strangers that share the same blue sky and bright sun every morning in the land of the free. Thank you.
Congratulations again to Ismail and all of our essay recipients. All right, thank you all. All right, I would like to thank everyone again today who participated. Jakira's going across the back. If we could give her a round of applause for emceeing today. Dr. Booker, Dr. Stovall, thank you so much for sharing your words and your talents with us today. As we come to the conclusion of our event today, I hope that you will have taken something away, learned something, and come to realize that we do have injustices around us, and maybe more able to realize those things that are happening. So as Dr. King said, our lives begin to end the day we become silent about things that matter. So I hope that you'll reflect upon Dr. Stovall's message and think about, maybe those difficult conversations that you could engage in and partake in so that we can better our communities around us. On your way in today, hopefully you got a bookmark, and on the back of it, we've got a list of some upcoming events that we've got happening this semester. So I hope that you will all come out and join us and participate, become more educated, and participate in our community. Additionally, at the end of our event today, we will be having our silent march around campus. If you didn't come prepared, we do have some gloves in the back that you can have. As well, our Alpha League members will be leading us in the march, so there will be a banner, and we'll be departing from just outside the auditorium here in about 3 minutes after the end of the event. So if you'd like to join us, we also have some hot cocoa for folks who are going to brave the cold today. But I want to thank you all again for joining us, for recognizing the important legacy that Dr. King has left us as we go forward. So thank you again. Have a wonderful day.